The psychedelic revolution is here. If you want to integrate your visionary experiences into your purpose, get clear on your entrepreneurial path, and help people while you do what you love, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to The Psychedelic Entrepreneur, Medicine for These Times. I'm your host, Beth Weinstein. I'm a spiritual business coach, 3-time entrepreneur, and a lifelong student of psychedelics and sacred plant medicines. You carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times. This podcast will help you to share your medicine so you can create transformation in the world. Listen in on conversations with psychedelic leaders, changemakers, and conscious entrepreneurs who are living proof that a better world is possible when you follow your heart and live in alignment with your soul. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Medicine for These Times. I am so excited for this interview. We're going to be talking about poisonous plants and a lot of around the energetics and other kinds of plant medicines as we know it. I'm here with Kathryn Solie. Hi, Kathryn. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So Kathryn is widely known for her work as a poisonous plant educator. She is deeply committed to fostering a greater cultural understanding of plant consciousness with the vision of cultivating a community of practitioners who engage in meaningful dialogue, learning from and supporting one another through both commonalities and differences. Her belief is that through collective effort, humanity can reconnect with its most ancient lineage, the profound relationship with the wisdom of the plant kingdom. Her educational background includes studying painting at Naropa University, a Buddhist-inspired institution in Boulder, Colorado. She has also completed a sacred plant medicine apprenticeship at the Gaia School of Healing in Putney, Vermont, and trained in Hakomi, a mindfulness-based, body-centered psychotherapy. While these experiences have shaped her approach, she often shares that the plants themselves have been her greatest teachers, of course. I love that. I've been following your work for a while. I even, I don't know if you ever saw this, but I got banned for 5 days for making a comment on one of your posts, which was really weird because your post, it was a post that you posted that they banned you for sharing some image that maybe wasn't accurate, but it was a tree.
I have no idea even what that is.
This was last year at some point. And I was like, oh my God, Instagram's getting weirder every day. It was just something, I think there was you got flagged for sharing something that was a questionable image, but it was a plant.
I forget what it was. The only thing I can think of is I had one post that got flagged because they said it was AI generated, but it wasn't.
Maybe that's what it was, yeah. And then I made a comment on it.
Oh my gosh, that's so weird. I didn't even really get in trouble for that, I don't think. I just was like, that's odd.
Yeah. It's real, it's not AI.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into it. I would love to know what led you onto this path of making, your quote, living by studying poisonous plants and teaching about them and just plants in general. And I always love to know, were you on a different path? Were you ever, a corporate attorney at one point?
No. I've never been well suited to that sort of work. In undergrad, I studied painting at a Buddhist university at Naropa University. And it's a strange question sometimes to answer because I have always loved plants ever since all humans love plants. We have a strong relationship to plants, but at this time, many humans are removed from the plant world and so don't really get to feel that love and feel that connection to the plants. And I grew up in the suburbs, and so I had exposure, I had a backyard and I could hang out with the plants and stuff, but it wasn't wild by any means. But I went to herbalism school after I did my undergrad and just felt called. I just wanted to study plants. I didn't even really want to become an herbalist. I just wanted to learn about herbal medicine. And it's either the first or the second weekend at herb school, our teacher invited us to connect in with find a plant on the land to sit with and connect with. And this herbalism school is focused on plant-spirit communication, plant-spirit medicine. So it's like we talked to the plants, so to speak. And I was really drawn to this plant. I didn't know what it was, but I was like, I have to go sit with this plant. It was like screaming at me. And it was even to the point where I was worried someone else in the group is going to go sit with this plant. And so I have to like run. It reminded me of being in preschool, and it was like playtime. And if you wanted to get to the toy you wanted to play with, you had to get to it first before everybody else did. And, I got to the plant. I don't even think anybody else wanted to sit with it or anything. But the plant was hellebore. And hellebore is a poisonous plant that a lot of people are probably familiar with without knowing it. It's common ornamental plant, grows in a lot of botanical gardens. People like it because it can grow in the shade and it keeps green leaves all year, and it has these like sweet little flowers that have been bred to have all different types of variations. But it was through connecting with that hellebore that it was just all of a sudden like, this is what I want to be doing. I ended up doing my final project in herbalism school about poisonous plants, and that final project became the poisonous plant medicine course. But also I think I'm drawn to those plants in particular because I think that we all have different makeup. We all have different kind of gifts that we're here to be offering, engaging. And for as long as I can remember, I've always been comfortable in the uncomfortable, like comfortable in the areas of life that most people are. I feel sort of silly saying that. I don't mean it as like a brag or anything, but just that's, death and trauma and things that people are afraid to discuss normally. Since I was a little kid, I've always been like, tell me more. I want to know more about this. Why can't I talk about this? What is this? Even when I was in school studying painting, one of my focuses was Thangka painting, which I don't know how there's two Thangkas behind me. It's a type of Tibetan Buddhist style of paintings where you're painting deities. And I was always drawn to the wrathful deities. Those were the ones that I was like, oh, this is what lights me up. And wrathful deities, for people that don't know, it doesn't mean they're like angry or vengeful. It's sort of probably not the best translation to say wrathful, but most probably well-known sort of wrathful deity would be Kali, ones that people are familiar with. But when I started working with plants, it was like, oh, these poisonous plants are just the wrathful deities of the plant kingdom. And so it just made sense. So for me, it's I love the plants so much. I feel such a strong connection to them. But in a bigger sense, I'm really drawn to what they point us towards, like the teachings that they have, which is going towards that which we fear. And I'm drawn to that in a lot of different emanations or forms. So
beautiful. Now I love it because I don't know about you, but I really believe that this is a huge problem in our society, is that first of all, there's so much fear to begin with, and then there's an avoidance of the depths, the kind of the shadow side of everything, and I think we see this played out of, our relationship with these kind of fearful areas of like diving deep into the darkness and even discussing death, I've interviewed a lot of like death doulas on this podcast and people talking about grief, and I personally did a life-changing grief ritual back in the spring that was like, whoa, like, why isn't this being discussed? This is like this has to become like part of our culture. But everybody's like, oh, I don't want to cry anymore. I don't want to feel bad. And, it's interesting. I work, a lot of this work and a lot of this podcast that I do bridges into the psychedelic plant space. And there's a lot of people that seek feeling better. It's like, oh, I heard that microdosing mushrooms will get rid of my depression. But then there's this other side, that's like, no, actually, it helps you see like more of the depth and the trauma, and that, like you have to go deep in order to truly heal. But I'm curious, like, does this come up a lot with just the the kind of non-psychoactive poisonous plants that you work with, or, you know, they are probably psychoactive as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, what is the point of, let's say, how about this? Like, what is the point of like connecting with a poisonous plant? Like, what can it teach us?
Well, so I look at it as plants are energetic beings, you know, just like us, like they're living, they have a vibrational field just like us. And so what they're putting out, like the vibrational field or the energy that they're putting out, each plant has its own sort of flavor, so to speak, just like humans, right? You know, and so what, say, a rose plant puts out, you know, what are the things that we think about when we think of roses? You know, love, the heart, maybe there's boundaries because of the thorns, things like this. But when you think about a plant that brings you potentially to death in the wrong dose, you know, the dose makes the poison, as Paracelsus said. When we think about what that might do energetically, it can bring us to those threshold places within our own psyches. And so, like you said, with psychedelics, which are also a big part, or have been a big part of my life, people will take them in order to get a void. Like, it's creepy as hell if you're ever one these people that are just taking doses and getting into like these high states, but frankly, I do not understand how they do it, how they repress, you know, these things. And then it's why you get so many people in those spaces now that are like delusional, messianic, high on their own farts, so to speak. And you know, but they're missing this whole piece that part of like feeling better, like you said, like people seek it out to feel better. But the real way to feel better is to go into those depths, to go into those places that are keeping us restricted, that are keeping us tense and keeping us tight, instead of building identities on top of these crumbling foundations that we have. It's like you have to go in and into those foundations and fix them up, or, you know, see what caused the cracks in the foundation in the first place and understand it. And so, you know, when you're doing like with some of these plants, there is historical and current use of people working with them, ingestion, in order to get into you know, they are psychoactive, especially the plants in the nightshade family are most well known for that, like Datura, belladonna, henbane, mandrake, brugmansia. You know, brugmansia is a not super common, but occasionally ends up as an ingredient in ayahuasca brews and things like that. But I find that you can still get a lot of the wisdom of the plants just by working with them energetically, whether that's through a meditation, like a plant spirit meditation, or through working with flower essences. And even, you know, doing something like that, like a plant spirit meditation or a plant spirit journey with one of these plants, it's also great training. You can take, you know, your experience there and your training that you have, going into these, and it's not like every time you work with one of these plants, you're going into like hell. There's also beauty, and there's something where I often find, and I hear this reflected back in students of mine all the time, that the plants, doing these connections with these plants, take one into these so-called dark places within ourselves, but help to put it in a context of, this is okay, this is normal, this is natural, there's nothing wrong with you, there's nothing wrong with feeling these things, except that it is, you know, discomforting. It's creating confusion and tension within your own self, within your own psyche, depression, anxiety, and things like that. So it can be just this training ground as well, where you can take these experiences that are more fully within your control and apply them to when you're working with medicines that you don't have as much control. You know, you can't just open your eyes and be like, okay, I'm done with the journey. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
I hope that answered your question.
No, totally. It's so good because so I personally have worked with, all the plant medicines that are psychoactive and got really into flower essences actually probably before I got into psychedelics quite young, but I got really into flower essences earlier. And I started noticing them, it was like, wow, what a profound effect. And there's nothing even in this. And back then I would call it nothing, Now I don't. But back when I was like, what is this? Oh my God, you mean there's nothing in here? And now it's like, whoa, super powerful. And I had I grow datura in my garden for the last 4 years. And I went to make an essence of it in 2020. And all I did was sit before, making the essence. And it was like, whoa, that is enough. And it was, took me on a really deep journey that was very necessary, but not easy. But, it always brings you out to this higher ground, it's like the healing and the growth that people are looking for from, let's say, psychedelics or even non-psychoactive medicines. It's always like you have to go in order to heal it. You can't just constantly be bypassing it and looking to feel good all the time. And it's not about feeling bad. It's like there's actually beauty in it. If we don't experience the depths of the darkness, how will we ever know the light? So thank you for sharing. I love that you did mention that psychedelics were a part of your path. I'm curious, did they have any influence on your path working with the poisonous plants, or, I'm curious, were you just kind of exploring and then you don't work with them now? How have psychedelics played a part in your life?
Well, I took psychedelics for the first time as a teenager, and it was very, and as a teenager, I didn't understand, this was 2005, 2006, and the landscape was very different there. Psychedelic landscape was really different, and the internet was really different. And so I had never even heard of the idea that these are spiritual or that they have the potential to heal. I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna get high and see cool stuff and trip out, and the journeys themselves as a teenager weren't particularly profound, but what happened afterwards, it was I felt like it rearranged me in ways that it's still, even now, I'm kind of like, how did that even happen? Because there wasn't these super profound journeys that I was having. But then at some point I got very serious about meditation and the so-called spiritual path, and went completely sober from everything, any sort of, mind-altering substances, and so didn't touch psychedelics until I was in my mid-20s. And it didn't really have much to do actually with my work with poisonous plants, but there have been periods since I started teaching these classes where where I would work heavily with psychedelics, where it would be, it's, for me, it's they come in spurts where it's I'm taking them a couple times a month, not microdoses. I don't see the value in microdoses for me in my life, because I want to use them to get into trauma. I'm not just, trying anyway.
Yeah. Not just trying to feel good every day.
Yeah. Which, still probably better than certain alternatives, but it's not a cure-all. Microdoses aren't gonna cure the root issues, but basically there's just been periods where I work very heavily with them, and then periods where I don't work at all with them for a long time, and I just follow my intuition around it. When is it needed versus when am I just trying to force it? Anytime I've tried to I want to take some, it's never really very fruitful. It's not as fruitful as it would be when it's just synchronistic or feels right.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And I agree. I actually talk about this a lot, to really, that's a whole other conversation about people, constantly seeking answers and seeking feeling better, and really being in touch with like, well, wait a second, like how much do you truly need? And what is the real intention, Yeah. Because the world has gotten so crazy in, even the psychedelic space where it's like, I keep wondering about the word addiction, it's like, yeah, you could be addicted to these medicines that they say aren't addicted.
Psychologically.
You're chasing exactly like a psychological high or a feeling better afterwards or whatever it is. Yeah. But, everything in moderation, right?
I appreciate you saying that because I'm like, it's not I don't know, it doesn't seem like that's the norm of the perspective at this time around psychedelics.
It's the insider's perspective. Because I've just witnessed, like the frenzy, and there's nothing like I try to really watch my projections and my judgment, and I'm like, okay, it's kind of like, it's like most of what happens in these kind of, cycles where it's like there's been this kind of like frenzy for the last 4 years, and it just became like really popular, and microdosing is everywhere, and now there's, it's like there's always something, and then I think everything eventually comes back into balance. But I also have witnessed people where it's like, wow, like, is there any sacredness left in the way you're approaching this? And that's kind of more the conversation is like, does this just become the replacement for, having a drink every night or like a bottle of wine or taking antidepressants? And I try to watch, like, who's to say what's good or bad, but at the same time, these plants are quite powerful. And I do believe, at a discussion with someone where I said, I really, actually, I gave a talk last week about this, and I said, I think the plants will start reacting back, which we're starting to see. There's a lot more, there's been a lot of, like, chaos and kind of not so skillful things happening in the psychedelic space. And I do believe, the plants themselves like have a reaction. Who's to say, I don't know, but it's been interesting to watch. And so I think, there's a lot of conversation of how do we bring it back into this sacred balance, and like a relationship, because when we lose sight of the relationship, that's where things can get, it's like it becomes just like the rest of our world.
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like there's a major piece missing of like integrating what arises and then also using other tools like meditation or doing psychotherapeutic work or, going into, so like the meditation, it can help you connect with higher states of consciousness that you don't need to rely on, and it's like more stable, maybe you don't, it's a lot harder, it takes more work. And same with the psychotherapy is once you're, built a lot of skill around going into your own stuff, you don't need substances as much, I think at this point in my mind, it's like the place where I would use psychedelics to do psychological work would be for birth, my birth, because that's hard. It's hard to get to with my thinking mind, but all the other biographical stuff, it feels like, okay, I can just like go into that.
Especially with your skill set. Hakomi is one of I actually talk about this a lot because I've been trained in some Hakomi as well. To me, it's one of the best tools there is out there. It's such a great integration tool, and it does tend to be popular for a lot of people working in the psychedelic space because of that. It's like we have to bring in the presence and the body. It's not just like the substance, Yeah,
and Hakomi can be kind of psychedelic too. You like go into, you're talking to your little child self, or you're, going into these intense spaces.
I work with my therapist is trained in Hakomi and also has worked in medicine, trained in multiple modalities. And I say, I'm like, God, every session I do, it's like a 1 hour psychedelic journey. It's completely out of, it's amazing. It's so effective and it's so helpful. And then it's like, yeah, you don't need the medicines. And then maybe when you do approach the medicines, you get to work with what you're actually doing in these sessions to deepen in. You know, that's where it's like what I would call more effective, like, use of these plants. But I have I wanted to ask you a little bit more about some poisonous plants. In particular, this also came up in this conversation recently, where there's people once in a while that are like, oh yeah, I've taken datura. I mean, I'm talking to people that have spent a lot of time out in the jungle in the Amazon, and maybe they call it like toei or one of the other related plants. But and I've talked to my own curandero about this many years ago. I'm like, so what really happens? It's like all you hear in broken Spanish is like, he told a story like, oh, you can just lose your sense of self and never come back. And I'm like, okay, that's enough for me to not want to go near this. And he says it very casually, like, nah, you don't want to do that. But have you experienced any of these dangerous and like really intense psychoactive plants to the like a threshold where you're experiencing like that kind of experience without actually going all the way in? I'm curious about that.
Well, okay. I will say, like, a lot of people could say the same thing about ayahuasca or, any other psychedelic that you can have, people say that happens, that you can have go into psychosis basically, but that only happen. I mean, that's unprocessed trauma. That's, it's like, so these plants are more likely probably to bring you into contact with that than more traditional psychedelics. I classify them as deliriants rather than psychedelics, even though in a way it's not that big of a stretch to call them psychedelics because they do manifest, they are mind manifesting. But delirium is, I think, a little bit more accurate of a term for them because people, and I've seen this happen too, people will have hallucinations or delusions come up and really believe that they're real. Like really like think they're, and it's not the same as, I feel like for the most part, if you're on more traditional psychedelics, there's a part of you that knows, oh yeah, you might be like really into it, but there's a part of you that's like, right, I'm tripping right now, or I'm on a journey right now. But with the deliriums, it gets a little harder. And I think it gets harder still when there's not any sort of psychological training. And the other thing too is I think it tends to be the people that seek these plants out, namely datura or brugmansia, which brugmansia is commonly called angel's trumpet. They have the downward bell flower, and those are more tropical plants. Datura has the upward facing flower, and there's sometimes called devil's trumpet. And those grow all over the world. Datura grows on every continent, but they often get confused. But they're related, but they're different plants. But often those are the ones that people seek out for the consciousness shifting effects of them. And people seek them out sometimes, I would say a lot of the time, because they're trying to get high and they're desperate. They can't find maybe preferred substances. And this is like, oh, it's a plant growing out. I found it growing like in a field out here. It's free. I can just, use this. And they're maybe expecting it to be more like if you took mushrooms or something. And it's not the same at all. It's like a very different plant. So people can have these really unpleasant experiences, unexpected. There used to be these cigarettes available over the counter until the 1970s called asthmadors, and they were a mix of datura stramonium and belladonna, which are two nightshade plants that are consciousness shifting. They have tropane alkaloids in them that can cause that sort of delirium effect. But people historically all over the world, so datura, like I said, it grows on every continent all over the world. all different varieties. And everywhere that it grows, the peoples of those places use it to treat asthma. And so it has this antispasmodic quality. It relaxes the muscles. This works, topically, but if you smoke it as a cigarette or you do an herbal steam, you breathe in the steam, you're getting that antispasmodic medicines right into the lungs, like just sort of like an inhaler. But anyway, these were available over the counter until the 1970s. And in the 60s, like hippies, or whatever,
No.
people would eat them. They weren't smoking them, they were eating them. And, then they would get into this delirium state. And there's people that believe that a lot of the things that used to get blamed on LSD, like people getting like naked and running out into traffic or something, was actually people were eating, or a lot of the time was people eating these Asthmador cigarettes and getting into these delirious states and doing things like this. And so you can lose yourself with these plants. I think not coming back from it means that there's some probably intense unprocessed trauma that came up, and then there's like a split that happened, and so you got stuck there. But I don't think I don't believe you have to stay stuck there, but I think most people treat it that way, and then you get labeled as schizophrenic or something. But it's just like trauma that's came up.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's such a fascinating way of looking at it. Yeah, it's kind of like you hear all these urban myths, just like the amount of fear. I mean, even like, I have bees. I keep bees, and the bees were hanging out with the datura last summer. Not this summer didn't go very well with the datura, but the bees were in there, and I was like, oh my God, they're in the seeds. I'm assuming they're taking pollen. Now wait, what about the honey? And, I started getting kind of, and then I actually did see the bees. I mean, who knows? This could be from some pesticides in the neighborhood or whatever, but the bees that week were like shaking really funny, like kind of like a weird,
interesting
dance energy. And I was like, what are they doing? Maybe this is from the datura. And then I started getting freaked out, and, it's like, Googling and finding weird stories. I mean, this world of, just information everywhere. It's like, who to believe? I mean, even like you just shared, these acid trips, all of us grew up with these stories of like, well, if you take acid, you'll jump off a building and kill yourself, which, hey, maybe it was actually attributed to that. But so then how did you really come to get to know like the truth or the facts with a lot of these plant medicines and these poisonous medicines, other than sitting with them and listening to them? But like, is there a lot of research, and is anyone like funding research as, for these as like the next realm of medicines?
Well, yeah, big thing has been sitting with the plants. And I want to say, too, just to clarify, I don't recommend ingesting these plants. Yeah. I just want to clarify that, because it's one thing if you're in a lineage, you're like in the rainforest and you're in a lineage of people who know how to work with this plant, and you're, receiving some sort of medicine from a medicine person or a shaman or something like this. That's one thing. But I don't recommend, people experimenting with ingestion of these plants, because it's very unpredictable and can be quite dangerous. So just wanna, even though I speak so much like love to these plants, I'm working with them energetically for 99.99% of the time. Sorry, now I forget what your question is. What was it again?
That's interesting. So 99, have you taken any of these, before we go into the original question, have you taken any of these plants and experienced that kind of delirium experience?
Yes, yeah. But I've never felt like confused in it. And I think that just comes from like training and just knowing that that's what the plants are going to do also. But now I remember your original question about how did I learn this? And a lot of it is, I would like read every book that's like ever been published on it, which I wish there were more, honestly.
Yeah.
But there's been research into these plants for, at least 100 years, I guess longer, depending on the plant, because a lot of these plants have their alkaloids or different constituents extracted and used in modern allopathic medicine, like these tropane alkaloids that have the delirium effect. Some of them are used for motion sickness patches, pupil dilation, although I don't think that atropine, is being really used for pupil dilation these days. Drying out the mucous membranes before surgeries. Some of them were used for twilight sleep, which was what they used to give women to give birth. A totally insane thing. If you guys, I'm not going to go into it now, but if you want to see something extremely disturbing, go ahead and look into that.
My God.
But yeah, they have been studied to a certain extent, but I don't know that they are. I don't know at this point that they're being studied heavily. I don't think they're super well respected. A lot of, yeah.
I'm curious if, thank you for sharing all that. That's amazing. And I'm curious if you've heard about, this is one I've heard about a few times in the last couple of years, about people who are working intentionally with snake venom. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, I have, to treat autoimmune.
I'm assuming that's why I've still been like, who is this and how can I talk to them? Because the people I've heard it from never explain like what it was for, but that would be my assumption, like combo and, frog venom and the bee venom therapy is, it's been proven. So I'm assuming that's what the snake venom works with, but I don't know.
Yeah,
sometimes I just wonder if people are like kind of just doing these deep dives into like how much can we push the edges, or or like some sacred practice of building a relationship with the snake. I have no idea, but curious. I was just curious if you've heard of this, because that's kind of a newer one I have.
Yeah, I don't know that much about like animal and insect poisons, but it makes me think of the Aghoris, these a sect of Shiva worshippers in India that interesting. They'll cover their bodies in ashes from the charnel grounds. They'll wear human bones as ornamentation, and they'll ingest like all different types of venoms and poisons, poisonous plants, arsenic, and this is their practice. This is their sadhana. Is they take the so-called left-hand path, where they're, instead of being like this pure ascetic, they're going into the all the things that are rejected, all the things that are considered bad or unclean, and finding something through that.
Amazing. I mean, there is something to it. It's kind of like you said. It's like you've been drawn to these realms of like the discomfort that I think not a lot of people are. I look at some people I even know where it's like, I just don't think they're capable, like the trauma. It's like, if you haven't worked on a certain level of feeling safe in general, to then intentionally go into like really heavy, dark realms, it's, I have seen, I mean, we hear, at least in the psychedelic space, we hear about people having psychotic breaks or, mental breakdowns of sorts, or people being re-traumatized. And so there is kind of like, well, if you have been called to this path and you're able to navigate into the darkness, I mean, it's not my favorite thing, but I have done it so much that it's like getting better all the time and getting almost kind of fun, like, oh, like I had something very dark happen to me yesterday and I was like, oh my God. And then I was like, well, there's something here. I just always see it as a gift for growth and learning. It's like there's some reason why this has come to surface. And so I could run away and avoid it or numb it, or I could actually go into it and hopefully transmute it and see what's there. But this is where I wanted to ask about like your actual teachings and the courses you have and the kind of people that work with you. You know, what is it that people are looking for when they're going to study and work with, poisonous plant spirits? You know, they could go hang out with Tulsi and, I don't know, nettle. Although nettle's pretty hardcore.
Yeah, it can be.
I stung myself the other week. I was like stinging myself. And I was, disclosure, I was going into a plant medicine ceremony and I was like, oh, let me sting myself first. And then I was like, you know what? I want to come out here in the middle of this ceremony and roll around in it and like see what happens. Whoa. But I didn't. But I think I wanted. I know.
I was go like, really either way.
Like, yeah, exactly. I'm like, this could be hell on earth, or it could be like
bliss. Yeah.
But like I see it as like, oh, this is a path of like possible transmutation of like that like prickly energy, which I don't love the feeling of nettle, but yeah, like what are people looking for in your classes, and what is your intention with teaching these?
Well, my intention in teaching the classes is the superficial reason is to introduce people to the ideas of, poisonous plants, the history of them, introduce them to ideas of trauma and mythology and symbolism and all different sorts of fun things. But I usually reveal this like later on in the classes. It's like people get drawn in by these gorgeous Brugmansia flowers, these beautiful, these like fun Amanita muscaria mushrooms, and people are like, oh, this is cool. I want to learn about these cool plants. And then I'm like, surprise, you have trauma. Surprise. We're going to go into the depths of our psyche. But there's something about these plants. Like if I just put a course together and I was like, I'm going to talk about all the same things that I talk about in the poisonous plant medicine course, but I left out the plants, I don't think anyone would sign up for it. But there's something where I feel like this is like the back door into deep work it's like bringing people through something that is very friendly in a certain way and inviting through plants. Everyone loves plants. Everyone loves a beautiful flower. And it allows this, it almost like, I don't want to say it puts people's guards down, but it's kind of is what happens. I don't mean it in like a manipulative way or something, but it's like, it's a safe sort of venue into places that people might normally not want to go towards or be drawn towards. And I find that, people take the class for different reasons. And I think at this point, people basically know what they're signing up for because I've written a lot about it. A huge amount of my signups come from word of mouth from other people who've taken the courses. And so I think they know what to expect. So I think, people are looking for the plant spirit communication. That's the other thing too, is it's also a backdoor into surprise, we're all interconnected, like everything is alive, and you can feel the vibration of something that's on another continent right where you are now. And we're all connected. And again, like if I was putting together a workshop where I was like, we're going to talk about interconnectedness, I feel like I would get very few signups. But because it's like the plants are holding it's this safe sort of entry point for a lot of people, I think, into this work. And I'm really grateful that it's worked out that way. Yeah.
I love that. It's funny because I'm leading a Rose Dieta starting next week with a former Rose with a former client of mine who she actually leads them, and I did it with her like 3.5 years ago. And it's it's a soft dieta. It's not out in the jungle with other plant medicine, but it was that same thing where it was like, wait a second. I thought I was just going to be like just connecting to the rose spirit. And it was such a deep journey into like just such a deeper level of like self-love and approaching life in a new way, and like the sacred boundaries. And she weaves so much of that in. That's not just like the plant and the spirit, but like really it's your life transformation. And that does include like really facing some kind of hard parts of yourself, or like, you know, like seeing like, oh, this came up, and like, why did this come up? Well, that's interesting. I'll say this. I'm about to embark on this rose dieta, which I haven't done in 3.5 years. And I did it. I started it the week after me and a former partner broke up. Yesterday on the eclipse, literally in the exact moment of the eclipse, I ran into that exact same partner.
Wow.
And I haven't seen him in many, many years. And I was like, and it was in the weirdest, like one in a million kind of ways. And I was like, wow, like this is like, you can't make this stuff up. These plans know what they're doing. It's like when you enter into this agreement, it starts, you know, it's like even just learning or going and sitting next to the Torah, and like all I did was sit and listen for like 2 seconds, and it was like, whoa, I got the message, you know, like it was so intense. So I'm so glad you're doing it, and really not just about the plants, but like this deeper healing journey and deeper depths into the psyche and the trauma and then the quote darkness, so people can transform. But I want to give you a few minutes to share about like what are some of these courses you have coming up, and also like where are you expanding your work and your business into the future? Do you have any, I don't know, books or anything like that? Netflix series coming through?
Oh God, they never put me on Netflix. Hello. Well, my main offering is this thing called the Poisonous Plant Medicine course. And I have, there's 4 levels to that. Level 1 is obviously the most populated of them. And I have another one starting in January. I could look up, I should probably figure out the exact date. So, because I have one running now, so I haven't really started promoting it. It'll probably be starting January 5th. I haven't announced it like officially yet, but probably by the time this comes out, I will have announced that. And level 1 is we meet for 6 weeks. We meet live online, but the classes are recorded, and we talk about all these different plants. We talk about belladonna, henbane, datura, brugmansia, foxglove, monkshood, hellebore, the yew tree, mandrake, and Amanita muscaria. We journey with them every week. We talk about plant spirit communication. We talk about trauma. We talk about wrathful deities. We talk about different myths. We talk about the Persephone myth. It's really cool. I love this. This is like the coolest thing that I get to do in life is offer this. And I've been offering it for, I think, 6 or 7 years now. I've taught it 17 or so times, this level 1, and it's really fun. You wouldn't think it would be, but it is. It's really fun and exciting, and yeah. And then, you know, if you enjoy level 1, I have a level 2 and then a level 3 and a 4 where we continue working with different plants each week. Continue on themes talking about, you know, things like boundaries and symbolism and psychic phenomenon, all sorts of things, the interconnectedness that the plants kind of point us to, and people really get they're really able to deepen into their practice of connecting with plant consciousness, or I prefer to call it plant consciousness, because the word like plant spirit has certain connotations. Like it indicates it's like a person, or, you know, it's like an anthropomorphic being or something, but it's really just the plant's consciousness, the plant's vibrational field. And then I also offer flower essences through my shop, and I have flower essences of most of these plants that I just mentioned. So it's, if you want to work with these plants in a way that's safe, essences are a really great way to do so. I also have a Patreon where I have monthly herbal care packages that I send out each month. So like a different flower essence every month. And there's like 80 plus video classes on there on topics like plant spirit communication, poisonous plants, symbolism, the Book of the Dead, herbal smoke blends, herbal coffees, like all different sorts of things are all there. And that's for all those video classes, it's $5. It's kind of absurd. Oh, and tarot. I have a huge series on Patreon about tarot. You know, if you want to learn how to read tarot, that's also a big part of my work is doing tarot. I offer tarot readings through my website. I also just a month or two ago, I started a YouTube show called 1-800-CALL-Kathryn, and it's you can call into the show. By the way, please call in, get a free tarot reading to 1-641-632-2727. Call in, you leave a message, and then on air I play the call, and I have it's all set up like it's built like a 90s infomercial, like psychic hotline. So there's like a green screen with space behind me, and but it gives real readings. Like it's not a joke. They're, real intuitive tarot readings, and I've been having a lot of fun doing that, but that's been a lot of work. It's been taking a lot of my screen time because you have to like stare at the screen and edit these videos. Don't edit. I'm like, I always tell people, I'm like, don't edit. It's more fun. For this, because it has like the green screen and stuff, unfortunately, I do have to, but yeah.
I love it. A call in old school style.
Oh, yeah, it's been really fun.
So good. Well, we'll have the links to everything you offer here. And I'm so glad that you're doing this and really honoring the plants and the spirits and, bringing this really necessary work out there to more and more people. Question for you to close with. If you had to choose, I know what people hate when I ask this, but what's your favorite plant or your favorite, two?
Oh,
I know.
Oh my God.
I know. It feels it's so hard to choose.
Well, I won't say it's my favorite, but what really comes to mind for me is Datura. Datura has been such a friend and an ally to me over a long period of time. And Datura feels like first of all, it's like this plant that I think has brought so many people are like drawn to that plant at this time. And it's brought a lot of people to the poisonous plant medicine course. Like if I ask people in the class, how did you end up here? People will be like, oh, I kept seeing Datura plants and then I started to look it up and then I found this class and and it feels like, speaking about like gateways or, back doors, Datura has this like beautiful, sweet, angelic kind of energy. But then it also has this just intense kind of like direct, take you to the depths kind of energy. And it's like beautiful, beautiful plant friend, as I'm sure you know, because it sounds like you had a strong connection with her.
Yeah. Yes, I actually last year I took one out of my garden and it had already gone to seed and I kind of took it back to all my plants that don't go in the compost or don't go in the burn pile, but like way in the back, kind of on the edge of a forest. And I went out there like a month ago and there it was like completely blooming and it turned into this. And I was like, oh my God, it's just like spreading. Yes.
Yeah.
It is beautiful.
They'll spread. They make a lot of seeds. And I want to say one thing before we go, which is I love the name of your podcast.
Oh.
And it felt like weird getting your email because when I started to put the course together, the poisonous plant medicine course, I was doing meditations with the plants and I kept hearing our time has come and the message of medicine for these times I associate so strongly with these poisonous plants. And so I was like, oh, this is so perfect.
I'm so glad you said this because, the story with me was it was during the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction of 2020 in December of 2020. It was so intense. Oh my God. And then I was actually at a retreat in Costa Rica with a good friend of mine who leads it. And I had an extremely powerful experience. And I had already known I was starting this podcast and it was really stuck on the name, kind of dealing with like, well, there's algorithms that want to, have like certain words in there. And then there's like, well, what do I really want? And this came through very strongly and I stuck to it. But then some professionals were like, well, you really need to have the word psychedelic in there. So I had it actually, this was the subtitle for the first year and a half. And then it just over and over and over, it was like, no, I don't even want the word psychedelic, because it's not about psychedelics. It's about like what truly is the medicine. And the medicine isn't just psychoactive or psychedelics or, plant medicine. It's like, you are the medicine. Your voice is medicine. The astrology is the medicine. I always say water is my absolute favorite medicine. Sun, so that there's so much more. And I'm like, I don't want to just talk about only psychedelics, because it's yes, they've led me. I have a very similar path with meditation and Buddhism, but the psychedelics were always like the cherry on top. Not the only path. So thank you so much for that reflection. I appreciate it. And I can't wait. I've been wanting to take your class for so long, for so many years. And I'm like, maybe this is the year. I've been in multiple trainings in the last year and a half straight. And it's like, oh my God, time. But maybe this will be the year. But thank you so much for having this conversation. I really hope people will check it out and learn how to connect more with the consciousness of these beautiful plant spirits that really are. I mean, I do believe this is the medicine needed for the times that we're in, the times to come. Is like, we need to really bring the shadow to the light. Yeah, it's like, you can't run forever like we've been doing for millennia.
Yep. Yeah, and things are going to probably get kind of intense in the coming years, is my guess.
Oh my gosh. I'm like, even this week alone is just like, holy crap. Like,
very stressful.
Just try to stay centered and in my prayers. But I'm like, wow, if I think this is intense now, like, what's to come? Who knows? But
yeah.
But it's like anything. I really believe it's like the more chaotic, it's also the more light is coming in. So it's like we have to learn how to hold both, and we can't always be bypassing and pretending. So I'm glad you're really teaching this, and I can't wait to. I'm gonna go say hi to my tutor later today, and it's on its last few weeks here. So thank you so much for your time and having you here. It was really an honor.
Thank you, Da.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're feeling inspired, I'd appreciate it if you showed your love with a review. And check out my YouTube channel where you can find the video version of this podcast. You can also head to bethaweinstein.com to learn more about me and grab my free business growth trainings. Remember, you carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times.